I used to volunteer at the local history museum during college, the kind of place that smelled like waxed floors and mothballs, with glass cases that hummed faintly under fluorescent light. It was small, underfunded, and so quiet that your footsteps felt like intrusions. The building had been closed for renovations the year before, after a water main broke and flooded the lower archive. They said most of the old documents and artifacts were moved into temporary storage. But when I started helping catalog exhibits again, the curator kept saying strange things like, "Don't touch anything that isn't labeled," or "If a display looks new, just log it later." One evening, I stayed late. The others had gone home, leaving the long corridors in that amber glow of security lights. My task was simple: count the restored items in Hall C. Only Hall C didn't exist on my floor map. There was a door between the colonial and natural history wings, metal, unmarked, enclosed with a simple latch. It wasn't locked. Inside was a narrow hallway leading to a room that shouldn't have fit within the building's structure. The air was warm, thick with the scent of varnish and something faintly organic, like old fruit left to dry. The lights were on. Not fluorescent, but a soft yellow glow from sconces that looked new, yet wired into crumbling plaster. And the exhibits. There were dozens. Glass domes, cabinets, full mannequins wearing clothes I didn't recognize. A postman's coat with 6 buttons on one side. A child's uniform with handwriting stitched into the fabric. Every tag had the same date, September 14th, 1902. I thought it was a reconstruction of an early 20th century event, until I saw the placard on the wall. It read, "Artifacts donated by the staff." When I leaned closer, I noticed something under the glass of one display. A photograph. It showed a group of people standing in front of the museum steps. The man on the far left looked exactly like the current curator. Same face, same posture. Then the lights flickered. The air pressure changed, like an elevator descending. Somewhere in the room, glass cracked softly. I turned. One of the domes had fogged from the inside, as if someone were breathing beneath it. I backed toward the exit, but the door had shut. The latch looked the same, but when I grabbed it, the metal burned hot. Behind me, the lights dimmed to near darkness. Each display case began to hum, that same low electrical sound I'd always heard upstairs, now louder, layered with whispers too faint to form words. And then I noticed movement in the reflection of one case, a figure stepping forward from the shadows of another. It looked almost human, pale, waxy skin, blank eyes that caught the glow of the lamps. Another followed, and another. They weren't mannequins anymore. I turned off my flashlight and pressed my back to the glass. My reflection was still there, but not quite. It was older, dressed differently. Pinned to my shirt in that reflection was a tag, Volunteer, September 14th, 1902. The last thing I remember was the sound of footsteps circling, slow, deliberate, synchronized, like a guided tour. When I woke up, I was lying outside the door, my clipboard gone. The hall was dark again. No sign of Hall C. The curator later said there was never a section by that name. Not in any blueprint. Not in any renovation plan. But sometimes, when I pass the museum at night, I see the glow of those same yellow sconces through the second-floor windows. And if I stop and listen closely, I can hear the faint hum of the cases, steady, alive, waiting to be cataloged again. Do you have your own stories of strange findings or places that shouldn't exist? Tell us about your experience in the comments, because the scariest secrets are often hidden behind old, unlocked doors.
When I first arrived at Ridge 9 Observatory, it felt like a relic from another century. A single dome of white steel, half buried in snow, surrounded by antenna towers that hadn't sent a signal in years. My post was temporary, 2 weeks of maintenance and data collection while the senior astronomers were away for winter recess. They warned me that the place had odd acoustics. Sound traveled strangely on the ridge, echoing back seconds later, warped, like a replay from someone else's memory. On the third night, the wind stopped. Total stillness. The silence up there wasn't peaceful, it was thick, like the air was holding its breath. I sat in the control room, reviewing old observation logs stored on magnetic tape. Most were mundane, meteor counts, radiation spikes, timestamps, but one tape was labeled only with a date, April 3, 1976. When I played it, the speakers hissed for several seconds before a voice came through. Object reappeared at 0213, motion inconsistent, altitude uncertain. Then static. And beneath the static, something else. A sound too deep to be electrical, like breathing. I thought maybe it was interference, wind caught in the dish, but the more I listened, the clearer it became. The voice on the tape wasn't alone. Something was breathing right next to the microphone. I rewound it, increased the gain, and that's when I heard my own name. Distorted, barely audible, whispered between the bursts of static. I stopped the tape. The playback light flickered even though I'd pressed stop. Then all the lights in the room dimmed at once, the hum of the generators dropping into a low pulse. Outside, the snow began to fall again, thick and soundless. I grabbed a flashlight and went up the narrow spiral staircase to the telescope dome. The hatch groaned open, and the lens was already aimed upward, perfectly aligned, as if someone had adjusted it seconds ago. The motors were still warm. When I looked through the eyepiece, I expected to see stars, maybe cloud cover. But what filled the viewfinder was wrong. It looked like fog, except it moved with intention. Slow, rhythmic, expanding and contracting in the black sky. I stepped back. The reflection of the eyepiece still glowed faintly, even though I wasn't looking through it anymore. The dome air felt heavy, ionized, the way it does before lightning. Then the intercom on the wall crackled. A voice whispered through the static. "Stay where you are. The observation is not complete." I ran downstairs to the control room, but the monitors had all switched to a live feed I didn't recognize. A black and white image of the telescope dome from above, except it wasn't empty. Something stood beside the lens. A figure. No clear shape, just an outline darker than the dark around it. The timestamp read April 3rd, 1976. The feed glitched once, twice,
and then my own reflection appeared in the glass of the monitor, superimposed over the shadowed figure, our heads aligned perfectly. Behind me, the sound returned, slow, deliberate breathing, matching the rhythm of the static from the tape. I turned. The air shimmered near the doorway, like heat distortion in the cold. I could almost make out a face forming, pale, expressionless, watching. Then the power surged back, lights blinding white. The distortion vanished. I packed my things that night and left before dawn. The snow had covered my footprints completely. 2 weeks later, when I filed my report, the director told me Ridge 9 hadn't been active since 1976. The same year, a researcher vanished during a solo watch. They said his last recorded words were almost unreadable on tape, except for one clear sentence. "The sky is breathing back." Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I tune my radio between stations, and every once in a while, just for a second, I hear it again. A faint exhale over the static, syncing with my own.
They drained the old reservoir 5 years ago, or so the town claimed. But on nights when the fog comes low enough, you can still see the surface shimmer, black, rippling, faintly lit from beneath, like something breathing just under the skin of the earth. I was hired last spring to survey the area for redevelopment. They wanted to turn it into a public park, maybe even a fishing lake. The access road was overgrown, asphalt fractured by weeds. Every 100 meters, a rusted sign warned, "No entry, unstable ground." The last one had been half swallowed by moss, and behind it, the air changed, heavier, thicker, carrying a metallic tang that stuck to my tongue. At the base of the hill, I found the outflow pipe. The steel hatch was open, though the bolts were sealed with a thick crust of mineral and rust. A narrow stairwell led down, slick with condensation. I told myself I'd just take a few readings, quick in, quick out. Halfway down, the sound began. Not water, something slower, wetter, like a heartbeat echoing through a cave. Each pulse vibrated the railing under my hand. When my flashlight flickered, the entire passage seemed to inhale. At the bottom, there was a maintenance room, half flooded. The walls were lined with gauges and dials that still ticked, though the power had been cut years ago. Something pale floated in the center of the water, a sheet of paper sealed in a plastic bag. I hooked it out with a stick. It was a logbook.
Last entry. Pump 3 active. Do not shut down. Pressure must remain constant. It's listening. I backed toward the stairs, but the air pressure shifted again. A deep, resonant thud rolled through the floor. The water rose an inch, rippling outward in perfect circles. Then, from the tunnel, came a low, human voice. Not words, just a single drawn-out exhale that felt too close. When I turned, my light caught movement in the water. Not a shadow, a reflection. A face staring up from beneath the surface. It wasn't mine. I ran. The steps behind me sloshed and rang with hollow impacts, perfectly in time with my heartbeat. At the top, I slammed the hatch shut and bolted it, even though I knew it wouldn't matter. The next day, I filed my report. Site unstable, unsafe for development. They never asked for details, but a month later, the local paper ran a headline. Contractor missing, truck found by dry reservoir. The accompanying photo showed the same hatch I'd sealed, open again. Sometimes when I drive past the ridge at night, I can see a faint glow seeping through the soil where the reservoir used to be, a dull, breathing light. And if I pull over and roll down the window, I can hear the sound of water moving underground, slow, rhythmic, like something that finally woke up and doesn't need the pumps anymore.
What forgotten depths lurk beneath your own town's surface, waiting to be rediscovered? Share your stories of eerie abandoned places or unsettling dry spots that still hum with untold secrets in the comments below.